Team, very lucky this week. I know I say that every single week. We have a very special fella from New York. His name is Keith Rosen, and he's the CEO of Profit Builders, and he's been named one of the best leadership coaching organizations worldwide. So when I say we're lucky, I mean we're really lucky. So Keith's going to join us, share his experience to help you sell more faster, coach more effectively, and develop a team of sales champions. So since 1989, Keith has coached, I think, over, and he'll put me right or wrong, over 3 million managers and salespeople on 6 continents across 75 countries. So when I say he's good, I mean he's really, really good. He's also the author of Coaching Salespeople into Sales Champions, which was the #1 best-selling sales management coaching book on Amazon, and Sales Leadership. Both of these books I have in my hot little hands, which was named Amazon's 2018 Sales Leadership Book of the Year. And he was also named one of the most influential coaches by Inc. magazine and Fast Company. Keith, utter pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming onto the show. And good evening to you and morning from us.
Yes.
Cool.
Good morning, Frank.
Yes. So Keith's in New York. I'm in New Zealand. That's NZMY. That's a miracle. You can see I'm not dyslexic, so that's a good start. So Keith, tell the audience, that's a pretty impressive roll call there. And before we hit the record button, I know you're a very humble fella. There's a hell of a lot of accolades in there. You know, author, speaker, huge training experience, huge coaching experience. Why do you do what you do?
I can give you the visceral reaction, but the question is so important and deep that I want to give it the attention it deserves.
Thank you.
My first visceral reaction, and from my deep core, let me speak from a place of core values, Surgeon, is and for those that aren't familiar with a core value, it's who you are when you show up, when you're fully self-expressed as a human being. So, for example, my core values are making an impact, connection, adventure, travel, self-care, clearly music, love. Those are just a handful. Family, of course. You know, those are a handful of my core values. And the first step is recognizing those core values. And the second step is living those core values. And why I'm sharing this with you is because one of my top 3 core values is making an impact, which is why you and I are talking today. So my hope is to continually following my journey and my path and my purpose, my why, to continually have an opportunity to work with great people like you. So together we can continue to share a message that people all over the world need to hear, whether it's on life balance or sales or the new way to lead and run an organization. If companies are still managing their people and selling the way they did 2 years ago, they're already set up for failure.
Very good. And I thank you for taking the time to think about that question, because I know that was a bit of a thumper of a one to start there, Keith. So probably my next question would be then is, because we've introduced you and your very, very impressive credentials. I don't know if you find this, my friend, but when you're training sales managers, and we'll get into the concept of management versus leadership and coaching, which I'm very interested in your opinion on. Do you find when you train sales managers and the millions that you have, why is it that they often only want to talk about their teams rather than themselves?
Interesting. So I'm going to ask for a little more clarity around that.
Sure.
When you say talk about their teams versus themselves, can you just unpack that a little more?
Course.
I think I know where you're going, but I don't want to make any assumptions.
Good. So what it is when you and I are in that privileged position, we walk into a room and they say, Keith Rosen's my man. We're going to put our sales management team through. We're going to train them and coach them. And these guys are good. And obviously you're a lot better than me. And I find, this is my personal experience, often they want to deflect the conversation away from them and what they need to do as managers. And they keep pushing and pulling the conversation back to their team. Like, this is what's wrong with my team. I've got a bunch of bozos, or I can't find the right guys, or they don't manage their territory, or they don't cold call. Do you find that same experience? Do you come across that, and do you find yourself having to constantly say, "Hey guys, this isn't sales team training. This is training about you."
Yeah, it's
Does that help?
I actually would coin this as a global epidemic. I mean, here we are, we're literally across the world, and there's not a country, and of course, always looking for your opinion because of your experience, that I haven't ran into a manager where at some point in time they're like, well, Keith, I inherited this team. It's not my fault. Well, Keith, now I never even saw my team. They're all remote. I was given to this team. I didn't even hire these people. Or, these numbers, Keith, I didn't set these quotas. This was the company. I know my people need to hit them, but this is insane. Always looking at the team, when in reality, sales is never about the salesperson. Coaching is never about the coach, and managing and leadership is never about the manager and the leader. Because when we're making it about us, okay, it's about what we can do and what we can achieve. Coaching is about them. But the distinction here is that there is a difference between assigning blame and excuses because of your team and taking full responsibility for your team. In fact, and I often ask managers to challenge me on this, and I will say to them, what if it is the success and failure of your team is 100% based on you?
Wow.
The success, of course, we're going to attribute and acknowledge our people. The challenges and failures are owned by the manager. And many managers would push back with all the reasons that I just shared. And at the end of the day, what I tell them is, whether you inherited a team, whether you're managing remotely, whether you didn't hire your people, whether you used to meet with your people and now you're only seeing them remotely, is same with your clients. While these changes have impacted the way we do work, it often hasn't changed how we're behaving and how we're engaging with people in a different way in our hybrid world. So, that's one of the things I see wherever I am. And what makes it difficult for salespeople to coach customers and for managers to coach the coachees or their peers is they're always focused on their agenda.
Yeah.
So coaching, though, is not your agenda. Now, it's one thing to have a pipeline review or a deal review or a company meeting. Fine. It's okay for the manager to have an agenda. However, when it's the coach and the coachee, it's always the coachee's agenda. Just like salesperson and customer, it's always the customer's agenda. Because when we make it about us, we're no longer giving value to them.
Yeah. Amen to that. I knew you'd have the answer, and sorry I'm so cryptic in my question. It's like there's this mantra. I don't know if it picked it up off you and these brilliant books that you write or someone else. So forgive me if it was you or how I credit it, but it was the phrase I've picked up and monikered is show me the manager and I'll show you the team. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what do I think of that? I think that is, and I will say it a different way. Your team is a reflection of you as the leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both the good and the bad.
Yeah. 100%.
And I'm sure if you and I spoke about the power of attraction and universal laws, listen, we attract people like us.
Mm.
Right? So at some point in time, when you look around and who you're surrounded with, you kind of have to look at yourself and how you're showing up.
Exactly. I mean, again, without talking in metaphors for the rest of the conversation, although my listeners will be used to indulging me on this, there's people that look outside through the window and there's very few that look back from the mirror. And it's the whole thing, these managers, very good ones,
Mhm.
and some not so good ones, because there's a trajectory, there's a bell curve on every population. And they blame and they play victim and all the
Mhm.
sort of symptoms and excuses and BS that you just talked about. And it's like, well, you are the manager, like you are the leader, and it's your job, it's your responsibility and accountability to get the very best out of your team. And I just think, the wonderful guests I've had like you on the show is like, it's so important you get that manager appointment right, because they're so, so pivotal. And yeah, so I mean, let's get into this further. Like, this mistake. Sometimes it causes two problems. You take your best performing sales rep. I call them a sales rep, and does them a disservice. You take your best performing salesperson, and you promote them and make them a manager. Now
Mhm.
that creates two problems, eh? Like
I've
you lose.
never heard of this situation.
Never said it. Never
Is my
said it.
sarcasm translating,
Yeah,
Surgeon?
yeah, exactly. This isn't familiar to me at all, St. John. So you take the best person, he or she, who's doing great job, crushing quota, nailing target, and then you put them in a sales manager position. Um, where I want to get to that question is like the skills that made you a top salesperson are not the same skill set as a sales manager. So can you help us with that, with your expertise? Because there's a lot to that.
There is, and to me, again, this is one of those, universal epidemics that all companies run into. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that as a salesperson, well, at any organization, let's face it, we all have targets on our back. We have
Yeah.
goals to hit, quotas to hit, KPIs, commitments. If we have targets on our back, if we look at, and again, just getting a little cerebral, the 3 points of time, past, present, and future,
Mm.
if we're result driven, if leaders are result driven, what do you think they're focused on? They're always focused on what's next, the next deal, the next client, or when salespeople, what's next, the next meeting, the next cold call, the next, appointment, that, moving the deals through the pipeline, always what's next. And the miss is that they're not focused on now. As a result of that, that also bleeds into this challenge you share of having a great rep being promoted into management.
Mm.
So to your point, if I was to paraphrase, you have this high performing rep. And of course, one day, maybe their manager approaches them and says, hey, listen, there's an opening in management. Would you be open? And as a salesperson, you're like, well, kind of look around and say, well, sure. Why not? And bang, you're a manager. Oh, no training at all. No, none of that. We're, here, just, what you have to do. Sort of like what you were saying before, at a top level, at a philosophical level, managers have an understanding of what they need to do to be great, but
Mm.
they don't have the strategy and, most importantly, the language of how to do that.
Oh,
And
that's
to
so
me, that's the most important point. So, and I'm going to dive into that in a little bit.
please.
To answer your question, and this is the listen, salespeople, companies, their jobs are difficult enough. My job is to make their life easier, just like you. And they get promoted into management. And what happens? They become the quintessential chief problem solver. Because here they were as a manager. They know the role, they know the company. So paint this scenario. One of their new salespeople approaches this manager and they have a challenge. Now, the manager clearly is not trained, especially trained in how to coach. So what does the manager do? Well, they know how to sell. So they search their database, and in a nanosecond, they say, well, when I was in your role, this is how I did it. So you should do it that way too.
Oh yeah.
And that is one of the biggest coaching traps, which is called coaching and managing in your own image. And now
Mm.
you're building Autobots and mini me's and robots and not tapping into people's individuality. So the big challenge is you have these great sales people that get promoted and all they become is a super salesperson. And
Yeah.
now they're doing their job for their people. And then they wonder why there's a proverbial line of people at their door looking for help. And the reason is you can't, as a leader, scale dependency. And by the way, who do you think created this scenario in the first place? The manager did. The more you give answers, the more you're sending the message. This is great. Every time I have a problem, I can come to my manager and they're going to solve it to me. I'll have to do my job. And the real kicker, the manager gives a solution. The solution doesn't work. Hey, Sunjin, not my fault. It's your fault. You told me what to do. I was just listening to you. So now managers are robbing them of the accountability they're looking to instill.
Yeah.
So the alternative, of course, is, that word empowerment. We've used it so many times. It's a buzzword. The definition, if you look up the word empowerment, Sinjin, is to give strength or power to.
Mm.
Solving problems for people doesn't empower them. It disempowers them. And what managers often don't realize is their first visceral reaction is, Keith, I do it because I want to help them. Okay, great. I know you're coming from a good place. Excellent. Fantastic. So you're giving them the answer, and then what happens? Well, a week later, they come back to me for another question and another question and another question. So when I go back to the word empowerment, when you're giving strength or power to someone, that means having them self-reflect, self-generate, amplify their self-awareness and self-reflection through the great questions that the coach is asking, for them to come up with their insight, realization, solution that they can act on their own. And what I alluded to before is so many salespeople love this. I go to my manager, they do their job for me. But here's what they're missing. They're missing the other person. They're missing the other type of person who leaves that meeting and thinks, I guess my manager didn't want to hear my opinion. I guess they just told me what they want me to do. I guess they don't have confidence in me or in my work. What do you think that's going to do to that person's confidence and engagement? Yeah. It's going to destroy it. And managers, even though they're coming from a good place, are creating, it's a paradox. They're creating the very problems they want to avoid.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much in that. First thing is, I'm going to quote you on this. You can't scale dependency. And then when you were talking about that, my friend, I was thinking about that drama triangle. Rescuer, let me help you. I'll show you how. Just give it to me. Or worse, I told you we'll have a good conversation. The white knight syndrome. Just give it to me. I'll sort it all out. And then because they're the manager or the leader, the CEO, the founder, everything, I was like, yeah, no, we can do that deal for 20% less. And you completely chop the legs out and disempower. And you do the complete reverse. But they're not, we'll get into conscious and, conscientious or conscious leadership, perhaps, which might take us down a few rabbit holes, but I think you'll be up for that. And on that drama triangle, you've got the rescuer on one edge of the triangle. You've got persecutor, like it's all your fault. You guys aren't getting out there. You're not talking enough people. You're not smiling and dialing. You're not driving up enough driveways. Or the other third point edge of that triangle is, oh, poor me. Poor me. I've inherited them, just like you said, Keith. Like, I've inherited, they weren't my appointments, and we can never get hold of good people, or we can never hold on to good people. The problem is it's all about them rather than themselves, the manager. And I really liked how you defined the true definition of empowerment, which is obviously to strengthen or empower others. And so it's paradoxical, like you say. Like, I see so many managers, and you've been using this term, a global epidemic, in some of the observations and themes that you and I have shared. It's so true. Like, we want an empowered, confident, competent sales team that are going to go out there and don't need to rely on us, because it's a bit like farming. you may or may not know this concept in farming, wherever you are in the world. It's the concept of stewardship and looking after the land. And when you leave that land, you leave it in a better place for the next generation, for the next people. And we have that as well in our All Blacks, which you may or may not know, our big rugby team. And they say you make the black jersey better. You make it better for the next person. So I love where you're going to on this. So I think it's very, very clear. Now, there's something that really pinged for me. I knew this was going to be good. You touched on it and you were very, very polite. But you said the most important thing is when a sales rep who's high performing is put into a sales manager's role, they got an idea, an inkling of how it is intuitively. But you say the most important thing is there were a few things that they don't know. And one of the most important things you said, and remind us, was the language. Now that was really interesting to me. Can you unpack that for us a bit?
Oh, sure. So, if you look at the way some managers engage, and I'm sure you've had some managers that engage with you differently and communicate to you differently, and I know I have as well in my tenure and career. Managers are so hyper focused on the result that it blinds them from their primary role of making their people more valuable every day. And unfortunately, St. John, when managers and salespeople wake up in the morning, they ask themselves the wrong question, which puts them in the wrong mind frame, and then that drives the wrong behavior. So let me share that with you. When managers and salespeople wake up, they often ask, okay, what do I need to do to hit my business objectives today? It's the wrong question. The right question for managers is, what do I need to do to make my people and my customers more valuable today than they were yesterday? And to me, that is the quintessential fundamental principle of coaching, is about how you can make other people more valuable every day. And how do you make people more valuable every day? By making yourself more valuable every day. How do you make yourself more valuable every day? Become a world-class coach, because that transcends to your team, to your subculture, which you create on your team, which then bleeds through the entire organization to develop that thriving, healthy coaching culture that we all want to be part of.
100%. And I was thinking as you said that, this concept of the, I think it's the Yahari window. And you know that one? Like, it's kind of like you have high standards for others and you set very high bars for others, but you don't set that same bar for yourself. And you're asking, I think number one rule of management at a very basic level is you never ask someone to do something that you're not willing to do yourself or you haven't done yourself before. So with my teams, if I'm asking them to do something, I would have done it. And because I've done it, I also know how to coach to it, because I know what you need to do that. And I think the other thing you said there is that, and this is gold, is like, you're so focused on the result, the outcome, we're not focused on the input. And I'm going to use a farming metaphor because we're in a farming context and our audience are very rural, agri-related or agri-tech or agri-business. They know a farming system is that if you look after the inputs, it's an input system and it's an output system. But the problem is we're focusing on the wrong thing. And I really like the way you frame that question, is like, what do I need to do to get a better result? Like the future. Whereas the present is, how do I empower and how do I make my team and my customers more valuable? And the only way I can make my team more valuable is if I am more valuable. And I've had a lot of people, world-class people like you on the show, very, very fortunate. We had a world-class ATP WPT coach, Alistair McCaw, on the last episode. And he says, you need to be that leader. You need to be constantly coaching and improving yourself to have that credibility and that competency that others can then tap into. So I 100% believe in that. And what I like about it is you've said we're all focusing on the wrong thing, because if we focus on the process, we'll get the outcome, right? Am I getting that right?
We are so in sync, and I'll just share or say what you just said in a different way. You don't coach the result. You coach the process. Here is your goal. Here's your KPIs. Here are your commitments. They're not going anywhere. They're set. Focusing on them does not make them manifest any faster. And running around reminding our salespeople of their goals is just bloody annoying. Yeah. It does not motivate people.
No. That's another one.
Just before you jump in, there's that other part of, because companies are, we're still, and just because you and myself, we're so immersed in companies, we see what's going on behind the boardroom. Companies are still coming out of this pandemic, still trying to figure out, do we have a remote company? Do we have a hybrid company? Do we bring people back in the office? If companies are still selling and managing the way they were pre-pandemic, they're set up for failure. Because let me generalize and say revenue, profit over people. Today, people over profit. If you focus on the people, the byproduct is success. You don't focus on the result to try to work backwards.
Yeah.
So for me, and I have shared this, and it's been so well received, and I'm glad I continue to share this, is the predominant sales and leadership strategy today is care. That's it. And I know your audience cares deeply about what they do and who they serve. And that is something that we can leverage so much more, and coming from a place more, not just connecting with them on a deeper business level, which of course is critical, but more so connecting with them on a personal level.
Yeah, and I love that.
Especially today, here we are. It would be wonderful if I was in New Zealand. Oh, wow, it would be wonderful. And we could have this, over dinner or something.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you have companies that are still trying to figure out how to present. What they're not building in is demonstrating how to care. And to me, that's a more personal conversation. So to give you an example, if I was a manager and I'm managing my sales team, my directs, I could always have that conversation about, pipeline and deal reviews and how many calls and what's going to close and what does your pipeline look like. All is critical to run a business and be successful. However, what does a conversation of care sound like? Now, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. The methodology is, Keith, that sounds great. Care is the predominant sales and leadership strategy. Great. But the next question people need to ask is, great, how do I show that? How do I demonstrate that? How does it show up in my languaging and communication so I am imparting that feeling to that person? Here's a conversation, I'm going to paraphrase it very quickly, that I implore. And by the way, this is something I would love to send to you, and feel free to send it out to all of your listeners as well. This is a conversation about how to connect with people on a deeper level. And especially when people are remote, they're feeling more isolated. They're feeling more disconnected than they ever have before. The level of isolation, depression, unfortunately, all these things have gone up because of the way we have transcended from this pandemic prior, where we were in person and hugging people and shaking people's hand, to building relationships on a one-dimensional
And Keith, sorry
screen.
to interrupt, because I want you to finish. What I think I want to add on that, make it really clear, is my guys and girls work very remotely in rural areas. It is really bloody lonely, and their only interaction is very far and few between, apart from their customers. They're in the middle of nowhere, like I was yesterday. They're in the middle of nowhere. So what you're saying is absolutely right. Please continue.
Yeah, and I think, well, I know that if I was having a conversation with you, it might sound like, hey, Sinjin, I know we're all struggling in some way. I know I am as well, and not just business, just personally. I mean, as you know, now that everyone's working remote, there's no more line between work and life. There's just life, and I would love just to chat with you about what you're doing to keep your life in balance and harmony, because I know I'm running into some challenges, and I'd love to just collaborate with you on that. Would you be open to it? Now, I could do that with a customer, but I definitely want to do it with each one of my employees, to exactly your point. And some of the questions you can use to facilitate this are way outside managers' line of vision, because they never had these conversations before, to my point. So, Mr. or Mrs. Coachee, what's working well since you've been working in a hybrid or remote environment? What, if anything, are you struggling with? How are you practicing extreme self-care? How are you taking care of yourself? How are you setting boundaries and saying no with the people that you're working with, so you can honor both your personal responsibilities and your responsibilities at work? How do you set those boundaries? And one of my favorite questions, how, at the end of the day, do you turn off work to be present with the people around you and the people you love?
Oh, so good, Keith. So good. You got a gems there, guys. Hope you're writing down. They'll be in the transcripts. And I know Keith's going to very generously share a few of those. There's something that, this is so timely, this conversation, because I've been on a bit of a mish lately. I've been listening to every single kind of coaching book. And of course, there's hundreds and thousands. And we're very, very gifted to get you on here. Very, very lucky. And then Alistair McCall, the other guy, that's he's actually Northern Ireland, and he writes a lot of good sports coaching books, coached a lot of very famous people. He said this, and I think you'll like this. He says, I need to, as a coach the person before I coach the player. Now, I think that was very good, just like yours. And it's like, and then listen, understand with these conversations of care, when you truly connect with your people, they know, they feel it, they sense it. It's the Mary Angelou quote, right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And humans, you know this, Keith, better than anyone, is until they've been truly seen and heard and understood, they're not going to go and do the things and run into battle and run through those brick walls for you. And I think that the point you're making here is it's become so remote, so lonely. My guys get beaten up all day. They get price buying farmers. The weather's terrible. The payouts down. The schedule price is down. You've got moaning, groaning farmers, tricky, very curt, very short, very aggressive, very no. And they're in a sea of rejection, bobbing up and down. If they don't have a coach or a manager that they can call on, like you say, and say, hey, how are you going? What's happening? And what I loved about those questions is you saw the person before you saw anything else. And like, how are they? And you're not being woke. You're not being disingenuine here. Is you have, as a coach, because this is what sales management and sales leadership is all about, as you well know more than probably anyone on the planet, is you have to truly show that you care. And you can only do that. So like, you will not know any of these names. Steve Hansen, he is our ex-All Blacks coach. Scott Robertson is our new coach. And there's a new documentary, and they study coaching around the world, NFL, AL, they're world high elite. Our rugby team is one of the best in the world, if not the best. And I've been watching his coaching series called Razor on Sky, which is our cable here, our satellite. And he does exactly what you just said here. He takes the time to go around all the players and see how they're going. They don't talk about the game, the drills, the role play, the runs, the tackle count. How's Mary? How are the kids? What's going on? How's Johnny getting on at school? Tell me about what happened when he broke his collarbone playing rugby and anything else. And it's exactly what you talk about. And the problem is we're so busy coaching for the result, we're forgetting about the person. We're missing it, aren't we? Is that there's you I'm not going down a rabbit hole here.
Spot on. And what salespeople and managers don't realize is the impact it's having on them, because we're not seeing it.
Yeah.
Until they get disconnected with us and they don't understand why, because we're focusing on the business, on the business. Since the pandemic, I would say where you would spend maybe 5 minutes, let's push 10 minutes, depending on where you are in the world, just to do a friendly warm up and connection. How are you? And then you would get into business. Well, today, in an hour call, I'm probably spending 25 minutes, if not 30 minutes, simply just learning and connecting with my client. And one thing today that is so important, I feel managers are not leveraging and salespeople aren't, is we have never had this level of exposure in people's homes that we do today. I mean, after all, you're in your home. I'm in my home. This is my office. If I was observing, you have these wonderful books in the back, we can have a great conversation. I would ask, what's your favorite book? Why is it your favorite book? What was the last book you read? How many times have you read it? We could have a great conversation about that.
We could spend days on that.
And I'll tell you what else we could spend days on. Music. Yeah. Keith, what kind of music do you like? Forget it. Yeah. Conversation's over. We're not talking about coaching. We're talking about playing music and seeing concerts. Yeah. And, but what does that do? It connects you on a deeper personal level, because that's what everyone wants. Because we have to keep in the front of our mind that everyone is going through something. And if someone is curt to you, if someone is impatient, don't take the bait. Instead, ask yourself or think to yourself, wow, I'm sad for this person. I wonder what's causing them to react this way.
I love
because that is not about you.
I tell you what, I've had to train myself, and I still do, and I still let myself down, but I'm getting better because I'm more aware, is I used to be very judgy. Mm-hmm. And the gift I was given, the listeners will be bored with this, the best gift I was given by one of my coaches was, St. John, curiosity is going to open more doors for you, and criticism is going to close them. So what you're talking about is embracing it with curiosity, going, I wonder what's going on there. How can I help this person? And then you talk them off the ledge, metaphorically speaking, and they are truly seen. Now, what I wanted to move on to, Keith, because I'm conscious of time for you more than anyone, is the skills that you're training managers or leaders or coaches, and we'll get into the definitions. But I think we talked about the coaching thing, that coaches don't rescue because they create dependency. They don't tell. Can't remember that wonderful quote from Drucker. I think the managers of the future know how to ask rather than tell, for the obvious reasons, for the enrollment and the empowerment that we spoke about. One thing I've noticed, I'd love to know if I've got this right or wrong, and selfishly, not just for me, but for the listeners, is the skills that you're imparting now to us, there is quite a close parallel with the skills you teach your team to connect with customers. So you know how you're talking about the coach and the coachee? When you talk about taking your time, seeing them, asking, being curious, empowering them, like ultimately the way you teach sales managers to coach their team is the same way the team would coach their client. Where am I going with this?
Speaking like a rock star.
All right, my friend, tell me, help my precious fragile ego.
I think you said it better than me. And it's interesting because when I'm working with managers and I'm delivering my leadership coach training program for them, inevitably at some point in time, a manager would say, this would apply really, really well for my salespeople. Well, let's break it down. What do I teach them? Well, I teach them the art of asking questions. Well, I think that we know the most important thing for salespeople to do is ask the right questions,
Oh, can you
which
just say
most
that
of the
again?
time.
Can you just say that again? Because it's something I've been saying, and a prophet is never appreciated in their own town. Please, sorry, indulge me. Say that last bit again.
I'm in a Zen stream of consciousness. You're going to have to remind me what I just said.
You said the most important skill we can teach sales teams is what?
The most important skill that we can teach sales teams, quite frankly, well, is discovery, as we talked about, is questioning, right?
That's
Which is
right.
part of coaching.
Exactly.
Seeking to understand other people's point of view is the quintessential foundation of coaching and sales. What's my definition of selling? The art and language of creating a new possibility.
Nice.
What's the definition of coaching? The art and language of creating a new possibility. In every conversation, it doesn't matter who you're coaching. I could be coaching a peer. I could be coaching my boss. I could be coaching my direct, and I could be coaching my customer. My goal is still to seek to understand and ask the right questions that are going to uncover a new possibility that no one may have even thought of. And that's what makes coaching and sales and being a manager exciting again. That's what makes it fun. If you're not enjoying your job as a manager or a salesperson, I can tell you why. It's because you're pushing your agenda, you're taking on everyone's problems, and you're trying to be the chief problem solver. Well, let's turn that model around. What if instead of giving the answer, if you have time to give an answer, you have time to ask a question? So I'm going to share, just to be really, really specific and on the court, in less than 1 minute, I am going to share my favorite coaching strategy that everyone can try today or tomorrow. Beautiful. Here we go. Someone comes to you. It could be a customer. It could be one of your directs. So let's say it's one of your directs, and I have a direct report and they're coming to me. And there are a lot of managers that are under the faulty belief that coaching takes too long. And if you believe coaching takes too long, I am not paid to be popular. You don't know what coaching is. So think about it this way. If someone comes to you and they have a question and they're looking for your guidance, you have two choices. You can take the left path and give them the answer, and you'll be giving them the answer the rest of their career. Or you could take the right path and ask a question. So here's the $1 billion 30-second coaching strategy. Here it is. Someone looking for help. Here's your response. Sinjin, I appreciate you coming to me for help, and I am happy to share my opinion with you. However, you're a lot closer to this than I am, and I trust you and I trust your judgment. So what's your opinion on how to move forward and achieve the goals you want? Or what's your opinion on how to resolve this? That's it. 30 seconds. I think it's less than 30 seconds. One question. Now let's break it down. They're coming to you because they want your answer. So think about how I started. Hey, I'm happy to share with you my opinion. What they don't know is I am not sharing it until I hear theirs first. So, however, I continue, you're much closer to this situation than I am, which is true, validating them. And I trust you and I trust your judgment. What do you think that's going to do in the mind of that salesperson? It's going to build their confidence and trust in you. And then you ask the question, so what's your opinion on how to resolve this or achieve what you want? The key word here, though, I need to point out, and remember I shared, and I want everyone here, I can't say it enough, coaching is a language, just like you're learning French or Urdu or Spanish or Italian. Leadership is a language, and the language is coaching. So when you're using the 30-second coaching strategy, this one strategy I shared, you're not asking for their answer. You're not asking for a strategy. You're not asking for a solution, because answers and strategies and solution can be right or wrong. But when you ask for someone's opinion opinions are not right or wrong. They just are. So if I have an opinion of where my favorite place is to visit, you might have an opinion on your favorite place to visit. I might have an opinion on my favorite food or movie or sport. You might have an opinion on it. Are we right or wrong? No, just an opinion that we must respect.
That is good coaching, team. That is good coaching. What I love is, well, you're very genuine, very sincere. You can see the care, the intent. Is you said something that's transformative there for everyone that's listening is coaching is a much more, not just an enlightening, but satisfying way of doing your job. Now, whether you're coaching your clients or you're coaching your team, you will probably know this book. I was reaching out very rudely while you were talking to me. The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander. You know this. You do know this one. So he's an orchestra conductor, and he talks about the shining eyes. So he looks for the shining eyes, those coaching moments. So if you haven't read this, Keith, you must read this book. It's called The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander, and he's a big TED speaker, millions of views, and you will love him. He's crazy. He's very effervescent. He's very extroverted, and he uses gesticulation and he uses his hand. But it's a beautiful, beautiful book, and it talks about what you talked about is the art and language of creating a possibility. And he's massively like you into asking the right questions, which you've coached us on so well. Now that we've landed that, here's another one for you, my friend. I'm really going for it now. How do you coach underperformers? Maybe a couple of things, a couple of morsels you can share. We can't go too deep, but like that's a problem that a lot of managers face. Now, the problem might be them.
Yeah.
And the way that they coach, they might be directional, they might be assumptive, they might tell rather than ask, or they've inherited or legacy. What are your thoughts? Like, that's a big problem for my guys is low performance.
There is no underperformer, just the wrong fit.
Tell me more.
I shall.
He's on to me.
So I actually, many people here, and I'll try to laser this. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to make assumptions. Many organizations, when they're dealing with an underperformer, have a compliance strategy, an HR compliance strategy called the PIP. You may have heard of it, the Performance Improvement Plan.
Yes, it
is a global compliant process. Quite frankly, it's meant to protect the employee and the company. That's what it's meant to do. That's it. Historically speaking, the PIP is ineffective. It works about 15% of the time, and that doesn't include after they come out of the PIP and they're on their own again, they don't revert back to their poor behavior and wind up leaving anyway. So many companies are now considering eliminating the PIP, which I implore, because if you're putting someone on a PIP, it means one thing: you've waited too long. And you're not coaching them every day. Because if you were, you would recognize problems when they're this big before they become this big. And everyone could see a problem when it's this big. But it's honoring those ABCs of leadership. Always be coaching. And that starts from the beginning. So we can see challenges and resolve them. It's sort of like sales 101. If you have an objection at the end of a sale, you missed the question up front.
100%.
So
more objections you get, it's because the quality of your conversation wasn't fueled by quality questions.
Amen. So how do I deal with underperformers? Number one, we start off with enrollment. Enrollment, which is could be a whole session on its own, is about aligning positive intent. Okay. So you can't just go to an underperformer and say, listen, you got to crank it out. You got to increase you got to make more calls. You got to close more deals. You got to get more appointments. What that's going to do is absolutely nothing except tarnish and impact their confidence and trust in you, because
especially
it's giving no value.
Especially if you did that publicly.
Oh, well, that's even worse. Because now you've just made them look bad in
Silly.
front of the rest of the team.
This one.
So here's how I do it. And by the way, please, this is another template I can send you for everyone here. So remind me and I'll send all this to you as well.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you.
Step 1, enroll, set positive intent. Because when intentions aren't clear, people default to fear. Okay. If I was a manager and I said to you, I need to talk to you, your first reaction is, what did I do wrong? Am I getting fired? Did I lose a client? However, if I said, hey, I'd love to talk to you about what we can do together to achieve our goals collectively, then it's like, oh, that's awesome. Of course I want to do that, because positive intent was set. So when it comes to working with underperformers, I have something called the 30-day turnaround strategy. 30 days, you can know whether or not the person is going to be a fit. And the best part about it is they're going to self-select. So managers love this because I've never met a manager who likes to fire someone. Okay. Most managers are coming from a good place and they want to help people. So the enrollment sounds like this. Listen, what I want for you is to achieve the results you want. And I'm fully committed to your success here. However, you have to be just as committed. So here's what I'm proposing. Let's work together for 30 days, set some measurable parameters and activities and results to achieve. And in 30 days, we'll review. And at that point, we'll talk about whether or not this position is still a fit for you, or maybe it's time to explore another position. And please know that I support your decision 100%. Are you open to this? So now I have buy-in. They know my intent. 4 weeks. Week 1, you set intentions. What's going to happen on week 2, 3, and 4? One of 4 things. They honored their commitments. They honored some of their commitments. They honored none of their commitments. They didn't show up for the meeting. Okay. Well, if they honored all of their commitments, congratulate them, congratulate you, and then re-up for the following week of what they want to commit to. If they've done some of what they committed to and not everything, acknowledge them for what they did, coach them where they missed the mark. They didn't show up for the meeting and they chose not to engage and honor their commitments. You need to ask a closed-ended question. Are you still committed to the process? So now let's forward this to the 4th week. One of 4 things happens. They did everything. They did some of it. They did none of it. And they didn't show up for the meeting. Well, let's talk about the ones that chose not to honor their commitments and chose, keyword, not to show up for the meeting. Do you think something magical is going to happen on the 5th week? No. You've collected evidence of change rather than be seduced by the potential you see in people. And if you're seduced by potential, you'll wind up keeping an underperformer around for anywhere for 3 months, 6 years, a year, 2 years. And if it's more than 30 days, it's too long, because we need to collect the evidence of change. So as I was sharing, at the end of that 4th week, if they did everything, if they honored their commitment, congratulate you, congratulate them. That's a successful turnaround, but don't stop there. Keep coaching and supporting them the way you did, because it's clearly making an impact. The only judgment call is the person who did some of what they committed to and didn't do everything. And that's where the manager has to decide whether or not they want that type of person on their team.
I love that. That's so good. That's so good. What I like to unpack it again and remind people is, if you get to a pip, it's too late.
Amen.
And you have avoided the hard conversations and you could see the weeds in the garden growing, and you didn't get gardening, and they've just got out of control now. And now you haven't taken really evasive action. And then I think the really good thing is about setting the positive intent when you enroll that person, and then asking them to agree to some commitments that you review, because you want to see them succeed and see them reach their goals and the results that we both want to share in and succeed in. And that is how you get it. That is very, very good. Keith.
And if I could even build on that, there's an exponential benefit that managers don't often realize, which is, how is that impacting the rest of the team? How is that impacting the morale of the team?
Yeah.
Do you want to be known as the manager that takes an underperformer and throws them to HR and not wants to deal with them and put them on a PIP? Or do you want to be known as the manager that wants to do everything in their power to avoid the PIP and support this person to get them to where they want to be? What kind of manager would you want to have? So think about the message this is sending for the rest of the team. If I had a manager that I'm observing and they have an underperformer and they're doing everything they can to support that person weekly, that's the kind of manager I'm going to look at and say, wow, I really appreciate what they've done. Even if they didn't make it and even if they opted out, your team is still going to say, my manager still made an unconditional stand for that person. Yeah. So we also have to look at the exponential cost or benefit of handling this.
I love that. I'm so glad you interjected and captured that, because you're sending a signal there, and whether they respect you and trust you and feel safe in you, because those clean outs, if they're thrown to HR, that can be very unsettling and it can bruise and have all kinds of downstream effects. Now, I'm conscious that we're going to be finishing in a few minutes' time. Keith, this is very closely correlated to the question we just asked. So we've talked about coaching underperformers, and you've just given us utter gold on that, which we are very, very grateful for, as in the resources that you're going to kindly say, and we'll sort that all out. My next question, my final few questions are, I get this question a lot. St. John, who should I coach? Because I've got a really big sales team. And I can't coach everyone. Now, viewers or readers or listeners, I should say, Keith is now smiling like a Cheshire cat with sort of familiarity. So I'm guessing you know what I'm talking about here, my friend.
I've never heard this before.
Yeah, they're more sarcasm. What's your answer to that?
I think we need to repeat that question again, just so everyone hears it.
Yeah, good. So someone comes to me or you and they go, hey, who do I coach? Who do we train? Who do we focus on? I don't have time. I've got too much on my plate. We know what a sales manager's role is like. They're half the time, then 3/4 of the time, they're doing nothing to do with sales. They're like pulled in by marketing, operations, customer service, customer success, everything that doesn't involve sales. That's the story for another day about how we reset that. And they go, we can't, who do I focus on? Who do we put in the training? Who should I focus my time on? Because I've got such a big team. Mm-hmm. Who should we involve? Who should I coach? And they're looking for a magical answer. What is your magical answer?
Well, my magical answer is this. There is no magical answer. And what I find, and people are always looking for that, okay, Keith, how much do I coach? What is that?
The silver bullet. The silver bullet.
Give me the structure in the box.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I could share one thing. Everyone gets coached. A player, B player, C player. Because if you're a manager who's only coaching the problem child, I can tell you now, you've destroyed the sanctity of coaching, because your B players and your A players are looking at you and saying, I'm not an underperformer. Why would I want to be coached? Coaching is for the broken wing. Yeah. Everyone gets coached first. Secondly, how do we know who to coach? Okay. Well, number one, people often ask me who's coachable, and I will answer that very quickly. As long as someone has a desire to change for the better, they are coachable. It may take longer to unpack that with some people, but they're coachable. Again, being mindful of time, who do you coach on your team? Everyone. Everyone. That being said, the cadence is what might change. So let's build off what we just talked about. We just talked about a 30-day turnaround strategy for an underperformer. Well, that's 4 weeks. It's 4 weeks. We know it's 4 weeks. That's the strategy to do it. We're going to accomplish that in 4 weeks. Now, when it comes to your point about dealing with the salesperson who And you know, you gave me that example before, and I apologize if you can give me that example again, so I don't go off on a tangent.
The sales manager that says, "Hey, who do I coach? Like, who do we put through on training?"
So thank you. So the cadence is what changes. So as I mentioned before, for a turnaround strategy, 4 weeks. Ideally, and again, I'm reluctant to say this, every week you coach everyone. I'm a realist. If you have a big team, and I'm talking, if you have 10 to 12 people on your team, let's wrap this up. If you have 10 to 12 people on your team, you should have no problem coaching everyone once a week or once every other week.
Wouldn't
You
you
start
coach them in
having
the
20
sales
people
meeting?
on
Wouldn't
20
you coach
people
them
on
in
your
the sales?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just want to pick up on that. You know, he talked about motivating and demotivating teams. This is completely related to what you're saying. Wouldn't you sort of install some coaching within the Monday morning sales meeting, which is monotonous and boring and demotivating? Wouldn't you use that as a coaching
God,
conversation?
absolutely. And I'm just writing the word meeting down because I still want to go back to the cadence here. So I
So
wrap this
let's talk
question up
about
for
the
everyone.
cadence.
So you may find while everyone gets coached, you may coach the underperformer longer for a period of time. You may coach the A player every other week. You may coach the B player every other week. And maybe there might be a scenario where the A or the B player comes in and says, listen, I want some more intensive coaching, because the turnaround strategy can also be what I call a success acceleration program for B and A players, where you're challenging them more every week so they can achieve more every week. So now the turnaround strategy, it's agnostic because it applies both to the underperformer and to the performer. So again, the cadence will change. And I have clients that I speak to every other week, but sometimes they might say, Keith, I'm having an event in 2 weeks and I could really use you for 3 times over the next week. Okay. So there's not necessarily a number. It's really about the coach and the coachee really coming to terms with an initial cadence and then knowing that can change. It's not locked in. It's not, etched in stone. It can change and it can evolve because people and businesses evolve. The other thing you said about the meetings, and I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm sure every other person here couldn't agree with you more, is manager, stop running the meetings. That's it. Stop running the meetings. Let your people run the meetings. Okay.
Yep.
Now, listen, I'm not saying there's not a time where you have to give this, the State of the Union. You have to share goals and strategies and any updates. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is, what if you do that for part of the meeting and then you spend the rest of the meeting with what people want, which is they want to learn from each other. They want to engage with each other. They don't want to hear, again, they might love their manager, but they don't want to hear their manager talk for an hour. Find someone and give them a challenge and say, listen, each person for the next 3 months, I want you to pick a topic that you're an expert in, and then I want you to present on that in the next meeting. Now it becomes a learning opportunity. Now people are looking forward to it. They're engaged. And final point on this, managers need to learn how to become facilitators. Let me say that in a different way. Team coaching. So they're not very good at that, because being a facilitator means asking questions to help build upon the conversation and include others. So what are some examples of being a facilitator and questions? Hey, that was a great comment. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to add to that? Anyone else have a different point of view? What's another way of looking at it? Hey, if we're looking at this strategy, what are some of the steps you think we need to take to make sure we create the best strategy? What's your opinion on that, team? Build off them. They're the ones. They have the wisdom. We hired them for a reason. Let your people do their job.
Love it. Love it. Now, last few, and then I'm going to love and leave you. You talked about coachability, which is so, so important. What is, I'm going to be very cruel here, and it might be unjustly unfair of me asked, but I think you might be able to.
I love it.
Do you like how I lay this up? So, what do you think, in your experience across all those decades, the millions of people you've coached and trained, and the wonderful books you've written, the number one trait you see in the most successful sales managers you've coached or trained?
So putting aside listening, okay, putting aside, let's say the skills, okay, um, unconditional care and being present.
Yeah.
And if I was to go through that, what my approach is and I call it transformational coaching for a reason. You transform people by not just changing what they do, but by changing what they do and how they think. So to me, there's the go do's and then there's the go be's. So the greatest leaders, the greatest coaches are the ones who focus on their mindset first because their beliefs precede experience. In other words, how you think is what you get. How you think drives your behavior. So now if we take that and we say, I am someone who is insatiably, not just curious, insatiably curious. Try to say that 10 times fast.
Yes.
Okay. By default, I'm going to ask more questions. If I am someone who cares, I'm going to take the time to be more empathetic and patient so that I can connect with that person on a deeper level. If I am someone who is patient, I am not waiting for that person to stop talking so I could just share my rebuttal. And if I was to add probably the single most important thing that if you're not, you cannot coach and you cannot sell is being present in the moment. Because this is, and I've said it before and I say it again, it's an occupational hazard. It's a global epidemic. Salespeople and managers have targets on their back. We have goals to hit, KPIs. And guess what? Their results, where the results live. Past? No. The present? No. They live in the future. So every leader and salesperson I've ever met is result driven because of the companies. We're conditioned to be that way. But here's the challenge. If we're focused constantly on the result, we're not focused on the now. We're focused on the next. And if I go back to my definition of coaching, the art and language of creating new possibilities, creation happens in the moment. New possibilities are created in the moment. Your agenda and your expectation live in the future. So I want to share a very quick lesson on listening. Books have been written on listening. I'm going to share with you in less than 30 seconds how to become an incredibly masterful listener. Be present. Be present. Because if you're not present, you can't be listening. So if you take all those things and listen, I am not suggesting being present is easy in any way. As a matter of fact, I would challenge people and say maybe 5% of your waking hours, you are living in the moment because we're being pulled in so many different directions. Personally, professionally, working in the office or a hybrid work environment or a remote work environment. We're pulled, family, responsibilities at home, goals to hit at work, people to manage, clients to see. So many responsibilities that we have being pulled at us. It makes it exceptionally difficult to be present.
100%.
And that's why I strongly suggest everyone create a morning ritual for yourself. Do something for yourself the first hour or so when you wake up, whether it's exercise, reading the Bible, meditation, taking your pets for a walk, playing with your kids, spending time with your significant other. What are those things that you can do before you start your day that will be helping you be in the state of mind, be present and engaged so you can have a great day? Because I can share with you personally, when I don't do my morning routine, and I don't know how else to describe it, but you ever feel just off? Like you just feel
100%.
off. You
It's
just
like a washing machine.
it's like I'm having a bad day, but I don't know why.
Yeah, it's because you haven't set it up, and it's El Herald and Miracle Morning. But like, if I don't have my sort of 20 minutes, half an hour to read before my kids get up, I haven't centered myself, which is what you're talking about. Now, I do have to love and leave you, Keith. I could go on for hours with you because you've dropped so much insight and intel for us, which we're very grateful for. This might be a hard question to end on. How do you coach for self-awareness? And you know
Coaching
why I'm
self.
asking the question? Because I feel when you talked about, when I asked you, what's the number one trait you look for with the millions of people you've coached? What's the number one trait you look for in the most successful sales managers you've seen and worked with? And you said, Sinjin, unconditional care and being present. And you really, really gave us really good examples of that. I think self-awareness is probably one of the biggest gates you've got to go to for growth. And I see
Agreed.
so many sales managers who are just simply not self-aware.
Yeah,
How do you coach that? And I'm going to push you like, what's the short answer? And if it's not, we'll have another conversation.
of course. Being living in the future or living in the past contributes to a lack of self-awareness. If we're fully present and engaged, by default, you will have a deeper self-awareness. If you're taking the time to self-reflect every morning, you're going to have a deeper sense of self-awareness. But then again, I've yet to run into a manager who hasn't dealt with that person who is not self-aware. The person that the manager sits down and says, "Listen, we've had some conversations about performance, and we really need to look at your numbers because I want to make sure I'm supporting you the best way I can." And the person says, "What are you talking about? I'm doing great." But you literally didn't hit your number, and you kind of drove some other clients away. So tell me, can you say that again? No, I'm doing great. No, that's not it. I'm doing great. How do you coach self-awareness? You need to hold up a mirror to them and ask the questions that they can reflect on. So I'll share with you a couple that I personally like, and I'm just going to riff them. One of my favorite questions: hey, listen, if you were in my shoes, how would you handle this? One of my favorite coaching questions. Other questions on self-awareness: how would you describe yourself? How do you think other people would describe you? If I asked them, what would they say about you? What is your legacy today? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? How do you want to be known? How do you think you're being known today? What are the behaviors that contribute to your legacy? What are the behaviors that tarnish your legacy? Those are all self-reflective questions.
Yes.
And it's not about what they need to do. It's about creating awareness, EQ, IQ, expanding your peripheral vision and removing those blinders we have about ourselves. Because as we all know, we're really good at seeing everyone else's problems. We're just not very good at seeing our own.
I couldn't agree more. It's an impediment. It's a block to growth when you don't take the time to self-reflect. That reflection, that mirror, holding that mirror is a scary reflection. That's why so few people do it, because it obviously exposes their deficiency, their status, their significance, their social standing. Like, I don't want to hold that mirror to myself because I'm worried what other people might think, that I don't know these things and I should be this person or I should be that. But I think taking the time to be present and taking the time to self-reflect, self-reflection leads to self-awareness. Yeah, very good.
Great point. Self-reflection does lead to self-awareness, and I'll even have them go so far as to say, that email you just shot out to the team, or that email you just shot out to the customer, I want you to imagine you received that. How would you respond?
Yeah. And I think what you've done so beautifully here is you've asked, and you just say it so eloquently. You just ask the questions, and they just fall off your tongue, because I know you've done this thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Keith, we will have to love and leave you. You have been so generous with your time.
Deeply my pleasure.
I've loved this conversation. I've learned so much selfishly and personally. You've answered our questions so well, so deeply, so generously. Where do people get we're going to put some stuff in the show notes through your lovely lady Laurie and get all the information. Where's the best place people can get hold of you?
I just relaunched my website, keithrosen.com, and many of the resources I'll be sharing with you. I have tons more. I have my new ebook out there. I have some free online courses for sales and coaching. I would certainly implore you go on my website and take advantage of that. And other than that, please reach out to me. Let's connect via LinkedIn. I'm always sharing new content, and it's another place to reach out to me personally, and Twitter, of course. And then on a personal level, if you have any questions, if there's something I said that you'd like me to go deeper in, let me give you my personal information if I can help you anyway. My personal email is keithr@keithrosen.com. And my mobile number is 516-231-2774. Now, why am I sharing this with you? Because what kind of coach would I be if I didn't take an unconditional stand for you?
Wow. Keith, you have been a real gent. Could have gone for hours. I've held you up for dinner. It's your dinner time, my mid-morning here. Thank you so much for coming on.
Deeply my pleasure.
What I would implore, using your words, people must get hold of your stuff. Your books are brilliant. They're the best books I've read, and I've read a few, and I'm not saying I'm an expert. I've read a few. They make so much sense around leadership of self, coaching, and the power of possibility asking questions. So incredibly thankful to you, my friend. We're going to keep in touch. We'll be swapping LinkedIn stuff. And I'm looking forward to seeing your podcast if you decide to blow the embers on that, because I think you're incredibly gifted at what you do, and you create massive impact for people. So Keith, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really do appreciate it.
It's been my absolute pleasure, and I certainly hope we get to do this again.
Thank you, my friend.
Well, I hopefully am wishing